But the real lesson out of that is that if you're going to be a CDFI, you're going to be at the whim of the margins of the market in some way, right? And so you always need to be agile, you need to be flexible, you need to be incredibly sensitive to what's going on in your market. And discussions like this are critically important, the discussions that come out of it. If the Disability Opportunity Fund is going to succeed, and I'm confident that it is going to succeed, it needs to be able to be really beyond the numbers. It needs to know what's going on. It needs to know what's going on in the lives of the people that it's serving. It needs to know what's going on in the organizations that it's working with and that it's financing. And that's critically important, but that's really where the value that it creates for investors comes from. And so that knowledge, that expertise helps it manage risk, it helps it spot new opportunities, it helps it put together transactions that otherwise wouldn't get done, but it also helps it go out and raise the capital that it's going to need to serve the needs of what's going on. One more sort of major point that I'm going to try and wrap up and try and get into conversation. So the story that Charlie told a little bit of how it is that Charlie and I came to meet and how it is that he convinced me. It wasn't very hard, Charlie, but of how he convinced me that this was something really worth pursuing. In my industry, we'd been doing this by 2001, 2002. We've been doing this for roughly 30, 35 years, and we were very successful. The industry was growing. At that point, we were growing more than 20% a year, right, in assets and in deployment of our assets and putting it to work. Our net charge-offs then as now were incredibly low. Our net charge-offs, our losses, the amount of money we've lost, not of investor money, but of our own money, is less than 1%, which is comparable to banks that work in conventional markets. And these days, looking at what's going on in the marketplace, it's pretty good. Our delinquencies are low and comparable to what mainstream financial institutions do. They were then and they are now. And we looked at our industry and we said, look at all the success. And as soon as we looked at the success, we said, if we keep going, if we keep being successful the way we were being successful, we're going to succeed ourselves right out of business, right? And that could be a good thing if what I meant was that we were going to be successful and mainstream financial institutions would come in. We think that's a good thing if they come in and sort of take pieces of the market. That's moving the margins. But what I really meant was we were outgrowing the model that we operated by. No one 30 years ago thought that we would grow as fast as we did, we'd manage the amount of capital we did, we'd have the opportunities that we did. And so we had created an industry structure that had a set of sort of what I think of as sort of relatively small, vertically integrated businesses where everybody did their own thing, right? Everybody raised their own capital, everybody managed their own capital, everybody went out and sourced their own transactions, everybody serviced their own portfolios. And so we had created, I like to say, and it's not really an exaggeration, if we had wanted to create a model of inefficiency about how to serve a market of low-income and low-wealth people, we had done it, right? There was no better way to do it, right? And so we realized that if we were going to continue to grow, we saw the needs, the challenges, the injustices around us growing bigger, we needed to come up with a new business model. And so we had, and I want to mention Adina in this because she was a big part of this, we went out to our industry and we said, look, here's our challenge. Our challenge is to grow, change, or die, right? Because we can't keep going this way. We need to find a new model. And so we set out on this process of sort of thinking about what different models were, and we had some ideas in our head. And then one day I get a phone call from Leslie Meek at the Citi Foundation saying, I've met this guy. He's really interesting. He came in to see me. It sounds great. He wants to create this thing. Didn't have a name yet. It was Charlie. And it's really intriguing, but I just don't know if it's, is this a workable idea, right? And that was, so Charlie came and we sat down and talked. And what was really interesting about Charlie and the idea that he had was that he wanted to create a fund, but he didn't want to create a vertically integrated fund just like all the other funds, right? What he wanted to do was figure out what is the single best way to make capital flow to create benefits. He had a clear purpose, to create benefits for people with disabilities, right? That was it. And if there was a better model than what anybody else was doing, it was great. He was flexible. He didn't really care what the model was. And one of his ideas was that he could, instead of sort of creating this fund that would then go out and try and establish itself in different places, he would create partnerships or participations with other CDFIs and be able to channel money in partnership with them or through them so as a result engage them in this challenge that you're all facing about how do you create benefits, how do you change policy, how do you demonstrate the market potential that you're all trying to serve. It was exactly the model we were thinking about, right? And I was really interested in. So here we have a market we didn't know that existed, but Charlie was quickly able to persuade us that it existed. A model that we thought had enormous, and still think has enormous potential. And last thing was a leader in Charlie who was the right kind of leader for the challenge that he was going to take on, because there is nothing, I often say that we let other people do things that are possible in our industry. You know, in our industry, we say that we let other people do things that are possible. We set out to do the things that are impossible, or that other people think are impossible. And Charlie came in knowing full well that this was not going to be easy, that there was not going to be an easy path, that there was, you know, that he was going to face enormous challenges, that every step of the way he was going to have to convince himself that every bit of all the policy changes he talked about were going to be things that took an enormous amount of energy and effort, and that he would, you know, he would have doors closed in his face and he would have people say no a lot. But he also understood that that wasn't any different than the market that he wanted to serve, and the kind of challenges that people with disabilities face every single day. And there was never a question in my mind that Charlie lacked the sense of purpose or the determination or the will to see this through, and that was critically important. You know, we work in a business that's full of transactions. We do transactions every day, and it's what sort of absorbs us. And every transaction we do is a little bit quirky and a little bit odd, and it's hard to do them at volume, so it takes a lot of our energy. But our purpose is transformational. Our purpose is to really change in fundamental ways how markets work, how systems work, how financing works. And that requires an ability that's not all that common to help people see the opportunity that's there and help them to accept it at a pace they can tolerate, but to make sure that they're accepting it at a rate they can tolerate and no slower, right? Because the needs are urgent and we need to work on them. And so Charlie, in all the time, the couple years I've been working with him, has never, ever taken his eye off that sort of North Star, that purpose, that brass ring. Charlie has always known exactly what it is he has to get to, and he's been smart about it, he's learned about it, he's learned about the options for doing this, he's taken the knowledge he had, the personal experience he had, the things he was hearing from other people, and he's brought it to bear. And so we have a lot of confidence, I have a lot of confidence, OFN, Opportunity Finance Network, has a lot of confidence that the Disability Opportunities Fund can be an enormous success and that it will be an enormous success.